Unless you really want it, it'll be so easy to give up. But you know what? When we realize that there is a life of our dreams that is available to us, and if you really want to experience it, then you just got to do the work. And what's really nice is that if you can think, you can do this work.
Hey there, this is Women on the Brink. I'm your host, Chris Jeffrey, a registered acupuncturist and wellness advisor with a passion for helping women live happier and more balanced lives. When I'm away from work, I'm usually outside in nature, either walking the seawall or I'm hiking in the mountains. And like many of you, my life has been filled with moments of hardship, some that I thought I couldn't overcome and really left me questioning my own strength. But through these challenges, I discovered resilience, courage, and a renewed sense of purpose. So I'm here to share not just my journey, but the lessons I've learned, and to remind you that no matter what obstacles come your way, there's always a path forward. Hello, Brinking listeners. Welcome to another episode of Women on the Brink. You know, I'm a person who I actually did a lot of counseling as a young woman. I wanted to know who I was and why I chose the paths I did. And I actually learned a lot about myself and my family dynamics through that. I also did lots of workshops and retreats on personal development in my midlife. And then I started to work with a personal coach soon after my husband and I went through a divorce. And I really like coaching because it doesn't just rehash those old patterns and shit. It's about setting goals and moving toward the life that I really want. And that's actually how I met Cheryl. It was in a group chat on social media, and Cheryl was and still is a very prolific contributor and coach within the group. And I really came to admire the life she had made for herself. She wasn't just talking the talk, she was actually walking it. And so I signed up to do some coaching sessions with her. I was struck by how happy she and her husband seemed to be because she was making reference to him often, and I really liked their healthy connection. So, as February is the month for romantic love, I approached her to provide some insight into how this relationship developed and came to be such an inspiring one. But as you'll see, her marriage wasn't the only thing that blossomed as she made changes to her life. Cheryl started working with the law of attraction many years ago and did have some success with it, but wasn't completely satisfied with the results. She knew there had to be a better way. So she turned to the law of assumption, which was founded by Neville Goddard, a 20th century spiritual teacher. In very basic terms, the difference between the law of attraction and the law of assumption is that with the law of assumption, you're already living as though what you want is already happening. So there's no I want, I hope, I need. Instead, it's I am or I have. So I am wealthy, I have a healthy body, I have a great relationship. And your thoughts and your emotions are those of yourself having already manifested the goal. That's key. So we're really fortunate to have Cheryl Carreon Andrisani here joining us on the show. Welcome to Women on the Brink, Cheryl. So first of all, can you just distinguish for the listeners what the difference between the law of assumption is and the law of attraction?
Well, the law of attraction is basically saying that you attract who you are. And it's very similar, I think, like the law of assumption works in conjunction with the law of attraction. But a lot of times people don't understand what state of being that they're occupying. And what law of assumption teaches is that you assume that you already are who you want to be. And therefore, yes, it is working with the law of attraction, meaning that you get back what you put out. But when you practice the law of assumption, you are operating from the level that you want to be at. Therefore, you're going to attract ideal scenarios that would reveal to you who you are. So that's why you operate from the highest level and then you get that back. And in turn, that helps you become who you want to be a lot faster.
Ah, so when you're operating from that place of I already am instead of this is who I want to be.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So you feel those feelings, you imagine what that would look like, how you would be behaving, all of
Mhm.
that, right?
Right. Yeah. And the problem is with law of attraction, it's a lot of, I want to say, toxic positivity because people think that they have to be happy and loving to attract that back. But truly, even though they know that that's what they should be doing, they're not actually feeling that within. And
Hmm.
what Neville taught was that feeling is the secret. So, you're acting all happy and you're acting like life is great, but truly deep down inside, you don't feel that way. You still feel stuck.
So that's the hard part then is to really, really getting into that mindset, that emotional mindset, right?
Yeah.
Because if it's only coming to us intellectually, it's absolutely not enough.
Right. No, it isn't because the feeling is the secret. Neville wrote a whole book on that saying the feeling is the secret.
Hmm.
And, we are not just our minds, but our body as well. And our body filters, a lot of the thoughts that we have and actually can give us a lot of clues about what our beliefs are. But you really have to be in tune with the way that you're feeling and be really conscious of it and self aware. So,
100%. So were you practicing the law of assumption before you met your husband?
no, actually, my husband and we started dating back in high school. So, we actually were dating in high school, then we went to the same college, and right after we graduated, 2 weeks later, we found out that we were pregnant with my daughter. So, that totally took life down a different path that we weren't expecting. And, we were, because we had just graduated, we thought, we have our whole lives ahead of us. So we're going to go out and get really good jobs, start careers. And instead, we ended up married 5 months later with a child with no savings, found ourselves living in government housing, and it was just totally not expected. And so, even though we were in love and we knew that we would eventually get married, I mean, that was the expectation, but it didn't work out that way. We started off with a lot of lack mentality and when you have no savings and you had an idea about what your life was going to be and it didn't turn out like that.
It's so funny how we have this expectation in society of how the sequence of events should happen. And for many, many, many of us, it doesn't happen that way. And I think the best thing that we can do, maybe to tell the next generation is that's usually not the way it happens. And that's perfectly okay. You'll figure it out, right? We all
Yeah.
figure it out. So
Yeah.
what happened then? How did you change this lack mentality?
Well, for years I didn't know anything about law of attraction. I basically, we were just living life whatever came in our experience, we dealt with it. It
Yeah.
wasn't necessarily what we wanted or how we wanted to do it, but we did deal with it. But we were basically on living on survival skills, it felt like,
Mhm.
right? But we were lucky that we had a lot of help from family. They were very supportive. His parents, my parents. I had a couple aunts that helped out a lot. We weren't necessarily totally worried because we knew that if we actually really, really needed help, that our family would support us. So we were blessed that way. But still, you don't want to have to rely on your parents, especially when you have a family of your own. But what I realized is that life is always changing and life is not the way that you expect it to go. But I mean, as a woman who, found herself at home with two young kids and um expecting to go out and get a job, and I was at that point of time I was, a college student, and I was out clubbing with my friends and having fun, and then all of a sudden, you find out you're pregnant and you understand that being in the club environment isn't the best thing for you, because back then you were allowed to smoke in the clubs, and, then you have to stop drinking. And so I did go through like a bit of a depression.
Mm.
And depression is something that I even had when I was a teenager. So it was just tough. And I knew that I wasn't necessarily being like, I had all these feelings of guilt on top of that, because yes, I wanted to have my kids, but then I wasn't being the best parent because I was suffering through my own mental health. And then plus the guilt of, relying on my husband too, and not bringing in any income to help him, that there was a
So did
lot of heavy emotions.
you felt some inadequacy, I guess, right? Because
Oh,
here you are,
yeah.
you've got the pressure of being a mother, pressure that I would like to go back to work, I should go back to work, but it's this big juggle, and all I would say 90% of women go through this. Do I stay with the kids? Do I go back to work?
Mhm.
So, okay, what was the turning point for you?
Well, my husband and I, like, my husband was very much an entrepreneur. He started his own business, and I had a lot of faith in him. And plus, that's what he wanted to do. So, being the supportive wife, I said, okay, let's do it, with the understanding that if we ever got in trouble, we could always call on our family. But, I trusted him. I mean, up until that point, he was doing really well. And I think our kids were maybe 7 and 8 years old at that time. So, they were more independent, and life was easier. Yeah, he started his own business. We started our own business. But I, at one point, started a coffee shop and we were trying to sell it. And it was so hard. Like we had buyers coming in and then nobody really wanted to put in an offer. And one of my customers saw that I was really stressed out about it. And she said, "You know what, Cheryl, I think that you could really use this book." And she recommended an Abraham Hicks book called Ask and It Is Given. And so that was actually my introduction into the law of attraction. I bought the book. It sat on my shelf for a year before I picked
Mm,
it up.
wow.
But after, like, this is around the same time that YouTube started coming out too. It started becoming really popular. So not only was I reading, but then I was also listening to a lot of shows or audio books that was on YouTube. And I just became obsessed because after reading it, I'm like, this totally makes sense. Like everything that it was saying was totally making sense. So I did that for 11 years. And I, like, every single day, would immerse myself in these teachings. After 11 years, I'm like, I can't understand why my life isn't completely changing. I
Oh.
had some really good manifestations, but overall, I still felt the same. And I'm just like, I must be doing something wrong. And, when you're ready to have something, then it comes along in your experience. Then I started seeing these quotes online, of people sharing Neville Goddard. What I liked about him is that he taught from the Bible, but he taught it in a way that made more sense to me, because I grew up in a Catholic household, but I had this big aversion to the word God. Like, me and God had a very unstable relationship because I suffered a lot. And when you have this God that's supposed to be loving, I'm like, I couldn't understand why I was suffering so much. But when I realized that, basically God was just giving me more of how I was feeling, well, then it totally made sense because I wasn't feeling at my best. Therefore, I got more of that. So that's why I resonated with the law of assumption, because when Neville said, you need to operate at your highest level so that you can attract to more of the things that you want, of the version of yourself that you would want to be. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to really commit to doing this because it felt like it was the missing piece. So, yeah, that's how my journey into law of attraction, law of assumption started. And I'm telling you, it is the best thing that could have ever happened to me. And I'm so glad that I persisted with learning to understand it because my life now, compared to what it was even just 5 years ago, is like night and day.
I feel that when I see your postings, I actually can feel the joy and the authenticity of what's going on in your life. Like a lot of people post things on social media and you're like, oh, okay, that's nice. But you don't really know if they're walking the talk or if it's just, to impress people or whatever. But
Right.
the fact is now that I know you a little bit better, I've really seen how you have embodied this. So tell me what happened for you in your relationship with your husband. You have three kids, right?
We
You have
have
three
three kids.
children. And,
Yeah.
you started out your marriage with a lot of struggle, a lot of difficulty. And so tell us how the law of assumption actually helped you to evolve in your relationship
Right.
with your husband.
Yeah, and it really is amazing because, my husband and I, because we started off on with a rocky start, and there was a lot of victim mentality happening, and a lot of complaining, and a lot of blaming each other, right? And when I discovered law of assumption, you really have to take a good look, take inventory of what your life is currently like versus how you want it to be. And so one of the first things that you have to do is determine what do you want your life to be like. And so I really had to define what it was that I wanted to feel like in my marriage because everything stems from me. And that's what you'll learn about the law of assumption is that everything stems from you, that you are the operant power of your life. The actions, the thoughts, the feelings that you have will determine the actions that you take. And then of course the actions that you take will determine the results that you get. So I started off with number 1, taking full accountability for the way that my life was. And the importance of that is because when you understand that you are the source of everything, then really nothing outside of you can affect you. Well, I guess it can, but you have a choice as to whether or how you respond to it, right? So then when you take personal accountability, then the ball is always in your court, right? That you actually have the control of your life and it doesn't matter how other people show up in your experience. It is always the way that you respond to it, how you view it. You can choose a perspective that either helps you or hinders you. So, I really decided about how I want my relationship with my husband to be and how I wanted to feel in it. And so I wanted things like I wanted to feel unconditionally loved. I wanted to feel unconditionally supported. I wanted to have really good communication. I wanted to feel like I could be myself when I was with him, like and not change who I was because a lot of times that's what we do is like you can't be your full self because when I do this pisses me off or pisses him off. So I can't, even though I wanted to be that, I couldn't be that. And so I said I wanted to be free, to be myself. And, I wanted to have a good time. I wanted a lot of joy and laughter in our experience.
What I'm hearing is the first thing is you're taking responsibility and then you're asking yourself, how do I want to feel in this relationship? Now, this is the hard part because, as we said previously, we can really intellectualize how I want to feel. In your mind, oh, I want to feel joyful. I want to feel happy. I want to feel this love, this unconditional love. But the reality is that takes training to get your brain to tell your emotions or vice versa that this is what we're doing. So,
Mhm.
I mean, honestly, you've got to have such a high level of awareness at all times to get yourself in check, to go, hey, we are stepping outside of that emotional state. So how did you reel yourself in? Can you give us some insight into that?
Yeah, well, I number one, I realized just from my studying about, the human mind and habits of people. And we really are creatures of habits. And we act in alignment with the things that we believe, right? So I realized that a lot of the beliefs that I was operating from weren't even my beliefs, number one. They were beliefs that I inherited from people when I was growing up or people around me or, even TV programs, right? You watch TV and you see all these shows with, different types of marriages, and then you make assumptions based on, these things happening around you. And so I really had to take a good look at myself and what I believed. Number one, Neville has a three-part process. They're called the fundamentals. And number one is self-observation. The second step is definition of aim, which I had already done. And the third step is detachment. And basically, that means that you detach from any state of being that doesn't match how you want your marriage to be. And so this is where the hard part is because nobody ever wants to think that they're the cause of their own suffering. So when it came down to the self-observation part of it, it was very eye-opening. And so like I'll give you a quick example is, I said that I wanted to feel unconditionally loved and unconditionally supported and that I wanted to have good communication in my marriage, right? But then when I actually was truthful and observed myself from a neutral point of view, so tried not to do it with judgment, but just to be curious about, who I was currently being in my relationship. And I realized that I was doing a lot of complaining and a lot of blaming, right? When you do that, it really feels defeating because you feel like somebody has all this control over you, When I noticed it from a neutral point of view, when you notice these things about you, that actually gives you the opportunity to change your habit and then detach from it. So every time I notice myself complaining, I would be like, okay, that doesn't align with who you say that you want to be in your marriage. So then it's the opportunity at that point to pivot. Stop doing it. You actually have to become that version. So you can say, I want to have open communication, but every time you and your husband have a talk, and you talk to each other, it ends up being like a fight or, raised voices, and it's not loving in any type of way. So it's like,
That's right.
okay, I have to really align my thoughts, feelings, and actions with what I want or how I want to feel. And so that was really eye opening there, taking personal accountability for the way that I show up in the marriage, right? Because
Yeah.
he's just reacting to me and I'm just reacting to him. And, never works out good that way.
And I love what you said to me the other day when we were speaking. You said the other thing that we have to be so cautious of, often when we're in a state of, well, all he does is take out the garbage, all he's doing is this, he doesn't do enough. And we're looking for validation from our friends and peers and family members. And really, what we're doing is we're just bringing more of that energy in rather than catching ourselves when, say, our friend is going, oh, my husband, this is all he does. Instead, we go, wait a minute, no, I'm not going to partake in that conversation. I'm going to take it into something more positive so that I'm not bringing in that energy.
Right. Well, that's what we tend to do is when we realize the way that there's like laws of the universe that we're playing, a game with. And it's like when you understand that there is the law of attraction and who I'm being. If I don't get out of that state, number one, if it's a state that I don't want to experience more of, I have to stop myself and pivot myself and allow myself to shift states. And when we don't do that, we just perpetuate a situation that we don't want to experience more of, but we don't realize that we're only getting what we're giving. When you understand that that's the way that it works, you actually stop to think about it.
Now, how does this work if you're the only one doing it? Like, does your husband have to be doing the same kind of work at the same time?
No. And he actually, I would get really mad that he didn't believe in this stuff the way that I did. And I was trying to improve myself, and it didn't feel like he was on board. And it made it feel like it was harder to do. Like it was almost like he was trying to sabotage my own development, right? But again, this is where we've got the gift of perspective, right? So you can always look at a situation in a way that will help you and make you feel better, because feeling is the secret, right? So I have to find a way to see it in a good light. So the way that I shifted that was, instead of saying, oh, he's trying to sabotage me and, he's not being helpful and, he's making it more difficult for me. The way that I saw it was, you know what, he's not necessarily on board with this, but if anything, it's giving me more practice in order for me to be solidified in who I want to be, because he's showing me resistance and I have to stay firm in the version of myself that I say that I want to be. So it actually, he's helping me be more of who I want to be in a quicker way. So instead of saying that he was hindering me, I flipped it and started telling myself a story that he's actually helping me become that version of me quicker.
And then what happened? How did he
So,
respond?
so a lot of the work, like when you really truly understand Neville Goddard's work, what he does is he teaches something called self-concept, which is how you see yourself is how other people are going to see you as well. And how you see other people is how they're going to show up in your experience. We have concepts about ourselves, how we see ourselves. We have concepts about, how we see other people. So I had a self concept for my husband, how I saw him. I have a self concept for each of my children, their personalities, what I believe their personalities are. And we have a self concept for everyone and everything, even how we view the world. And so, if you really want to magnetize good things to you, we've got to raise our self concept. Number one thing is, I always, had this concept that I'm not supported. I don't feel supported in my marriage. Like, with having two kids, well, three kids at that time, I was like, I'm doing everything in the house. I got to do all the cooking. I got to do all the cleaning. I got to take care of the kids. I got to, do everything. I felt like the whole responsibility of the household, which was a lot, fell on my shoulders. And then my husband just gets to go to work, and he's having a great time at work. And then, even when he comes home, he's not helping me. I had a self concept of him that he was lazy. Lazy and unsupportive because, after a day of work, he would sit on the couch, whereas, I needed help cooking. And that didn't serve me, because when you realize that if you believe that he's lazy, well, then that's how he has to show up in your experience. Or even if he wasn't lazy, you wouldn't actually see anything other than his laziness.
Yeah.
Right? Even if he was helpful. But because I was so focused on this concept of him, then that's the only thing that I would see. My mind would actually disregard everything else that didn't match that version of what I believed him to be. And so I really had to change, number one, my concepts about myself. So I felt like I was, not unconditionally loved and not unconditionally supported. So I had to stop telling that story because I was only perpetuating a state that I didn't want to be in. So I started telling myself, I am supported. I'm unconditionally supported. I am unconditionally loved. When you start telling that story, at first, you may not see the effects of that, but when you continue to tell it, then all of a sudden you're going to start noticing things that have always been there, but you weren't giving it your attention. So it's really important to change the stories. It's like, do I really want my husband to be lazy? Well, no, I don't, because that doesn't match how I want our marriage to be. So I had to start changing the story. And, when we tell a story, it means that we believe it. And a lot of times we're telling stories that we would never want to re experience again. And so it's time to stop telling stories that don't align with what you want to live your life, and instead start telling the story about everything that's good and everything, basically start dreaming again and believe that your dreams can happen. I used to think, oh no, that's like too far out there. That'll never happen to me, and then we actually shut down, the potential for our dreams from happening because we don't even have an open enough mind to believe it could be true for us.
Please stay with us. We'll be right back after this quick break.
Join us on our website for articles from our podcasts at www.womenonthebrink.net. There you'll find extra tools that can be used to raise self-awareness and build resilience. We want to make this experience as interactive as possible for you Brinkers. So join the forums, introduce yourself, and share your stories.
So how long ago did you start implementing these changes and changing the narrative?
So I started really doing it in 2020. That's when I discovered Neville Goddard. So 5 years ago.
5 years ago. And your story is not an uncommon one. I think a lot of us women feel the same way, that we're underappreciated, not seen or respected for the work we do in the home. So where is the relationship now, 5 years later?
Oh my God, it's so amazing. My husband now appreciates me more than ever. At the beginning, I started calling us the dream team because we were working together we had an online business at the time. And so we were with each other 24 hours a day. And people would be like, I don't know how you guys are still married, living together, working together. But I started calling us the dream team, thinking that, we complemented each other really well. He had his strengths that he brought to our relationship and our business, and I had different strengths, and we complemented each other. And that's what I started telling myself. And I'm like, nope, I'm unconditionally loved, unconditionally supported. Well, now, and even he started doing this shortly after I started doing this work, but he started really appreciating me. And every single day, he's like, I'm so lucky to have you. You are so beautiful. And it's compliments all day, every day, saying, you're the best thing that ever happened to me. And every day he says this. It's not like, something that happens on special occasions, but literally every day.
And not something that you're enforcing or imposing upon him. It's actually coming from him.
It really is coming from the heart. But I think that what contributed to that was, since I knew that everything stemmed from me, and he had no choice but to show up in my experience in the way that I saw him, because that's what the teaching said. And I didn't necessarily believe it at first, but I thought, you know what? I'm going to test it. I'm going to test it. And I played it like a game, and let's see what happens. It can't get any worse than it already felt like at the time, with a lot of stress and a lot of blame and a lot of victim mentality. I said, I'm going to try it. I'm going to really put forth the commitment to it and be really intentional about making it work. And so knowing that I had to show up as well as, the ideal wife, because that's how I wanted him to see me. I wanted him to value me and say, like, my wife is amazing. Well, I started acting like that, like I started showing up as a very caring and loving woman in the relationship. And, I started appreciating him too. So even with, at the beginning I was just grateful that he took out the garbage. But when he came in from taking in the garbage, I would really get into the feeling and say, you know what? Thank you so much for taking out the garbage. And it wasn't sarcastic in any way. It was really heartfelt because, yes, when you're a mom that does everything, if there's one less thing that I have to do, then yes, I'm grateful for that. And I really did feel appreciative of that. And I would be more verbal, whenever he did something around the house. Oh, thank you for putting the dishes in the dishwasher. I would be extremely verbal with that and
So
let
you
him.
started acknowledging him more and more and more.
Yes, exactly. And then as I was doing it to him, he started doing it back to me, right? Because now
Ah,
he's feels more appreciated. Therefore, and this is the way that it works when it comes to law of attraction. What I
right.
put out, he's going to give it back to me as well.
Got it.
So,
Beautiful.
mhm,
I love that. That's amazing. And it's
yeah.
something that I think that we all need to hear, because we all hear about how, we read about it, but to actually hear how you implemented it and how it's working in your life, in your marriage, is so, so special. So I
Mhm.
wanted to ask you, and I'm sure this is what the listeners out there are wanting to hear from you, is in the law of assumption, they talk about your SP, which refers to your specific person. So people are looking for somebody special, a romantic interest. How do we apply these beliefs to attract a specific person?
Right. So this is where I would say, like, I know that we all want somebody special in our lives, right? Because we believe that we're going to be happier when we have somebody to share our lives with, right? But the way that I would recommend to do it is really determine and how you want your life to be, and then work on yourself first. Like, really get clear on who you want to be and observe yourself at first. Because if we're working with the law of attraction and there are parts of you that still need healing, or, like you're feeling deficient in any way, then what ends up happening is you're going to attract somebody that is exactly at that same level as you, right? You cannot attract somebody more than who you believe that you are to be. And so, if you really want to have a great relationship, I say work on yourself first and get yourself up there, believe concepts about yourself that really align with the type of partner that you want, and be them first. Be that person first in order for you to attract that type of person. Because I've seen, and a lot of my clients are like this, they rely on somebody else outside of them to be the source of their happiness. I've found that that's a lot of pressure to put on another person, right? And if anything, that person will eventually start resenting you for it because they're going to feel like, I have to be everything to this person, otherwise they're not going to be happy. And a lot of times that ends up that that person can't even be themselves when they're around you. And it's not really a good relationship. So I say, work on yourself, work on being the best version of you that you can be. That way you can attract that type of person back. And you come from a place of being whole and complete already. And that with or without that person, I still am able, to experience love and happiness from within, but you're just extra. You know what I mean? You're just somebody that I can share my life with, but not be dependent on you.
Yeah. And I think too that when you get yourself in order and you know who you are, that is when you are going to recognize those qualities within yourself. You're going to recognize them more readily in somebody else. And ideally, I mean, we don't want, just another version of ourselves as a partner, but we do want certain things, especially our values or our belief system, to be in alignment with who we're bringing into our life. I mean, otherwise, we're going to be faced with a lot of conflict, don't you think?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Low self esteem. Like, I didn't value the work, even in myself, that I was investing into my own family. We a lot of times equate our own success with money. You're not really successful, unless you have it monetarily. Right. But abundance, I realized that abundance was more than that. And especially now, too, now that two of my kids are older and I really now see the people that they've become, that being a result of how I raised them. It's hard to see in the moment your value when you're in the middle of doing something. But I really had to raise my self-concept and cheer myself on and say, you know what? I am doing good work. I'm raising humans, and I want to make sure that the people that I raise, like go out there and be really great people and start affect other people around them. It's actually the greatest work, if anything.
I think what I'm hearing from you is that abundance doesn't just show up in a monetary sense, as a lot of people in our culture view it. And I think if you have this abundant mentality where you can see that you're worthy of it, because I know a lot of us, myself included, have had imposter syndrome, and we have to really work at thinking that we're worthy of an abundant life. And abundance, when we focus on it, whether it's in a romantic relationship, whether it's a financial endeavor, whether it's our children, our family, our community, it's going to reflect on all of those aspects, not just one. It's going to be everything. Would you say that? Do you have any last thoughts on that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, every aspect of our lives, from being a parent, from being a wife, from being a businesswoman, being a daughter, like there's so many different aspects to us, but like I think that when we live from our core values, it affects every aspect of our lives, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, when I first started doing this work, it wasn't necessarily even to heal my relationship. I thought because, we came from lack. We were living in lack for 25 years and, just basically surviving. So the reason why I initially started to do this work was to create abundance in my life in terms of financial wealth. And so I went to the seminar in 2020, a financial seminar, and this guy said, more millionaires are made in times of crisis than at any other time. That was so foreign to me, that idea, right? And I'm like, I really obviously don't think like a wealthy person. And this is what I was saying that I wanted to be. And I'm like, I feel so far off from it. But I started doing the work. I started noticing, when I had lack mentality when it came to, my money mindset. And every time I noticed something, I would pivot and say, okay, that thought doesn't serve me. What can I think instead? And so I had a lot of limiting beliefs when it came to money. But as soon as I started switching my beliefs that, so that they worked for me instead of against me, things changed really quickly. Like our business sales increased. We did about $500,000 in sales a year. In our very first year, it went, after me doing this work, it went up to $1.8 million in sales. Yeah, tripled. Yeah. And then even then the year after that, because I'm like, there's something to this, it's working. The year after that, our sales went up to $3.6 million. And in a 4-year period, after from applying, my working on my money mindset, we did $10 million in online sales.
That's incredible.
Hmm. But, I always thought that if I healed my money story, my wealth story, then it would take the pressure off of my relationship with my husband, because a lot of the fights we had were about money. It felt like money was the source of all the evil in my life. In 2020, when I said I wanted to become a millionaire, well, 3.5 years later, that came to be because we sold our business. Yeah. So like, this was my husband's business when he started it. And when I say that I felt like, when I changed my story from being somebody that was not unconditionally supported to a woman that actually was. And this is what Neville says, is that you don't need to know how things are going to happen. Our job is to just keep our eye on the prize, keep our eye and operate from the version of ourselves that we want to be. Earlier in that year, some random person called us and said, "Hey, are you, I buy successful businesses. Would you consider selling your business?" And it wasn't even a thought to us. And I had this belief that there's no way that my husband is going to sell this business because our business is already successful. Why would we give up something successful? But then my husband said, I really do think that we should sell the business so that you can pursue your coaching career, because I see how much joy and fulfillment you get out of it. To me, that was one of the ultimate acts of unconditional love, that he was really willing to sell his business so that I could pursue something,
What a
that
beautiful
I,
story. I
yeah.
love that. I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, again, you're just exemplifying how you've created abundance, not just in your marriage, but, in other areas of your life as well. So,
Mhm.
Cheryl, if people want to get in touch with you, if they want to learn more about what you do, or would like to be coached by you, how can people find you?
Well, I do have a website. It's www.livinginjoy.ca, because I made that my number one priority, is to live my life in joy. So that's what I ended up naming my company, Living in Joy. Or people can reach me on Facebook, and my name is Cheryl, Cheryl Carreon, Carreon, and last name is Andrisani, Andrisani.
Excellent. Well, I'll put all of those in the show notes for people to find you. And I just really want to say thank you so much for being on this show today. You provided us with so much to think about. And I think, too, we just need to remind people that you don't have to do this all at once. It sounds a little overwhelming, to be making such big changes in our life and our way of thinking. But I would say that even if you can make little shifts daily, and just keep honing that self-awareness, that you can also have a life full of abundance, right?
Yes, you absolutely can. And you have to really desire it. Unless you really want it, it'll be so easy to give up. But you know what? When we realize that there is a life of our dreams that is available to us, and if you really want to experience it, then you just got to do the work. And what's really nice is that if you can think, you can do this work. Yeah.
So true. Thank you so much for your time and
I
sharing of your
appreciate.
knowledge.
Thank
What
you.
a
I
gift you
appreciate
are.
the opportunity. So are you. Okay, we'll talk to you later.
Sounds
Bye.
good, Cheryl. Take care.
Thanks for joining. And I want you to know that this isn't just a podcast, this is a movement. So share this information with your friends and let's go, ladies.